Welcome back to Travels with My Lamps. This is chapter 14. We're going to talk about the artists that I've worked with, mostly those I've had a close association with. Others I did one show, good or bad, so I've got some off the cuff comments for some of these artists. Starts out with the quote as usual, and it's from Ian Hunter. Move over, because you're standing in my light. Chubby Checker. My first star that I ever lit. He fell off the stage in Ottawa, climbed back up, didn't even miss a note. Cyndi Lauper, totally afraid of front light and playing the blues at Pride. Dan Hill, I fell asleep behind the light board and I woke up in the next song. Fabian, great guy. Spent a couple of days with him in Newmarket. That old club Bogies, spent a lot of time hanging out with him. Holly Cole, well, fabulous and from another planet. Best band ever. LaToya Jackson, painfully underwhelming at best. Larry Gowan, a great talent, and I wish I had a chance to work more with him. Steve Miller, what a dick. Robbie Lane, an absolute gentleman and a consummate performer. Ronnie Hawkins, now they're the Hawk, a blast from the past, and we owe it all to him. Tower of Power. Rocco unplugged my hazer. I had permission from the horns and the vocals, and right before they went on, Rocco climbed up a ladder backstage and physically unplugged my haze machine. Chantal Kreviazek, whatever, go away. Jackson Brown, nicest rock star ever, and thank you so much for running on empty. The Fifth Dimension, fuck off. Didn't go well. Gil Moore, hey Gil, when are you putting the band back together? Jeff Healy, can you see the light? James Brown, godfather of dicks. Donnie, Marie, and Nathan Osmond, lovely people just like you'd expect them to be. Del Shannon, and I quote, don't put lights on the back of my hair, man, it makes my neck sweat. Big Sugar, why you gotta be so loud? Why? Shaggy, live in Paradise, Newfoundland, from one island to another. Martin Short, total professional, funniest production meeting I was ever in. Nash the Slash, best Canadian costume. Frank Soda and the Imps, first runner-up for the Pyro hat. Mark Haynes and the Zippers, second runner-up for the Mirror Ball hat. Mump and Smoot, best clowns ever. Tom Wilson, epic space Wookiee. Stephen Fearing, an angel. Colin Linden, meh. 5440, proud to be part of the team. Gino Empry, look like an unmade bed and barking mad. Ed Mervish, a one-of-a-kind class act. Garth Durbinski, the jury's out for me, I never got burned. Jimmy Fuller, last of the old school union bosses and a truly great man. John Allen Cameron, took me to Europe and taught me how to drink scotch. And Slick Toxic, I got fired after 2 gigs because I didn't do blow and score chicks for the band. Like, that's my job. You've got the fucking guitars. Adam Lang, aka Doug Adams from Pyrotech. Now, just as I was starting out in the business, I met Doug, who was just about to purchase Pyrotech. Doug was an opera-trained singer with a hell of a set of pipes and a mighty cute ass in those chaps. Hey, it was the 80s. Singers were glam, crew had really big hair. Doug and I owned a lot of gear, so every time we went out, we were a production juggernaut. We had Wiggy on lasers, Jerry Cameron shooting pyro for us. Band was 100% original, and I recall we'd put in a cover tune each set just so the audience could relate the playing with music that they know. We blew off so much pyro in all these clubs. I had the best lighting beams ever. Pyrotech started out very small. Uh, while Doug went on vacation, I could pop into the shop, check the messages, be out in an hour, maybe make a little emergency delivery to somebody. But it was just running along like a nice small company. Doug soon realized that his future was in the business and not in the band. So one day he came into rehearsals and told us it was all over. Now I was mad as hell, as I had put a lot of work into that band, and it was my first taste of defeat with a band project. Now, it all turned out for the best. Doug became a hugely successful pyro designer and supplier, and I'm a 35-year overnight sensation. Vivian Williams. Hi, Viv. I spent several years with her and a variety of musicians. Viv's a statuesque goddess of a woman with just a massive, massive voice, comparable to Tina Turner. Maybe better some nights, just saying. She had an album called My Temptation, and we toured all over promoting it. I was tour manager, and I had to mix most of the time as we couldn't afford an LD. I met Viv on the album release show at the Imperial Room in Toronto. I was doing lights that night, and I really didn't know anything about the artist or her music. As we got to the end of the set, I had one floor light left in reserve, the Silhouette. And when she hit the song, she struck a pose, and I hit that white light, and not only did it look great, it kind of made her dress disappear. And the final pose was so sexy, I got the job for management that night. A great lady to work with, an awesome friend, and so much fun. We had a lot of fun on the road, didn't we? But the curse of Canadian chick singers reared up and the project stalled. So if you ever want to, maybe grab the mic again, holler at your boy. Mad About Plaid. I love that band. This band should have made it. In fact, they won Star Search in the US one year, but just couldn't seem to capitalize on the success. The band was where I met the bass player Eric Sustar, who would be in and out of my life regularly. Also started working a lot with Ross Woolridge. Hey, Roscoe. And the saxophone. And we got up to a 6-piece horn section called the Tartan Tutors. Our first gig together as a team was in Newmarket at Bogey's nightclub. This was a house gig for Bernie Sandor and I, so we pulled out all the stops to make it a killer show. This was also the only time I ever had a crush on talent. Liz Soderberg, I had such a crush on you. You were so gorgeous, so talented, and you did my hair before the show, and that just kind of got my attention. Anyway, we were mullets on fire, and I miss you guys. Let's talk about the 13 years that I spent with Michele Rankin. I got this gig in a very backwards fashion. In the early 90s, Michele was a huge breakout star in country music, with her face on the side of a tractor trailer and a bus she designed herself. She had an LD TM named Jan Elliott, and Dan Brooker was her lighting tech. Eventually, Dan took over and ran things for years. Now, one day, Michele had a gig at the London Fairgrounds. Dan was on the road with the Rankin family, and I got called from production to LD the show. We took the information we were given, 2 straight trusses on chain falls, pretty simple, and drove the truck to the gig. Now, when we got to the venue, there was an old stage trailer scow thing, and there was just no way to get that truss in for upstage, given what we had with us. So out goes the plot. With a tip of the hat to Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention, I start freestyling. I emptied out the meat racks that carry in the rack of 6 par cans, and I tipped them up on their side, on either side of where the drummer would go, and put some lights back in, road strapped them in, and took my stock of techno beams and hung them anywhere I could. Now, when her tour bus showed up mid-afternoon, out pops Brad Burkett, straw hat wearing, deep south talking, tour manager front of house. He takes one look at Frank and Rick, and he goes off on me about the artist's needs and whatnot. And after I calmly explained that as the gig wasn't advanced correctly, there was no physical way to put a normal lighting system in, and this was my save. After about 30 minutes of this, I believe I said something like, well, somebody screwed up, my man, and as there's no way to hang this rig in this venue. And I've been working all day to save this show and give your artist a decent light show, and I know that's what you want. So I'm not emotionally invested here. I'm just your LD du jour fixing a mistake. And I suggest you concentrate on audio and your artist and let me do lights. Now, as we get to the show, I'm doing my thing and I'm bashing away on a conventional light board and running a couple of chiclet controllers. And in between songs, I'm head down trying to set up the next group of scenes for a song I don't know. And some dude keeps trying to talk to me, and I blow him off and talk to the star. And at one point, Brad turns to me and said, "That's Michele's manager, Brian Ferryman, and he wants less light on the stage between songs." My ears of Michele, that was the only lighting note I ever received. And sorry, B, that was a pretty bad impression of you. 2 days later, that southern voice was dripping down my phone lines. Michele and Brian would like you to be her lighting director. And I said, but you already have an LD. And Brad said, after a considerable pause, Michele and Brian would like you to be her lighting director. And I said, sure, on the condition that they give me 72 hours to get a hold of Dan and make sure he was cool with it. This is pre-email and cell phone days, so the only way was to call his ex-wife and explain the situation and ask her to try and get a hold of him on the road. I never heard back from Dan after my 13 years, and my 13 years spent with Michele Wright were filled with adventures across the world. Hey, Dan. Katie, how you doing? We gigged from flatbed trucks in small towns to huge country festivals in France. Nobody could fit more gear inside a bus than us. Nobody worked harder than Michele. From dealing with us all day to when her heel hit the top stair of the stage, she was always on. We could do 45-minute shows followed by 2 straight hours of autographs. She could remember names, sat through freezing cold or boiling hot tents, and signed and posed until it was time to go. When I joined the organization, Michele had high production values and a shrinking production budget. Not always the way. At this point in my career, I had not owned any lighting equipment for close to 15 years. And in that time, the computer and LED revolution had taken hold. And almost all gear could speak with each other. I decided that if I bought my own light board, I could rent it to Michele super cheap, and then start renting it out to my other clients at a better rate. Due to my years of running the CompuLight Animator and Vectors, I was super comfortable on them. And Steve Plotkin, shout Steve, arranged for me to buy his demo console. I got a Vector Orange for $10,000 US. The first time I took the board out with Michele, we were going to start a Western tour in Winnipeg, and I shipped all my gear out on a skid. And when I unpacked the board, the touchscreen had a huge crack down it. Further research indicated there wasn't enough foam restraints inside the matching factory case that I had bought with the board, and it bounced around till it broke. Welcome to owning gear again. A huge tip of the hat to the CompuLight family as West Sun Winnipeg rushed me over a Vector Red, and I took it and used it for the next 3 weeks on tour. Let's talk about the time the bus caught on fire. We drive through the Rockies in a snowstorm. We park ourselves in a hotel parking lot in Surrey, BC. We all had dinner together, and then Brad and I decided that we'd go for a post-meal smoke. As it was raining and the bus was empty, we decided we'd go smoke on the bus. Now, as soon as we opened the door, we knew we had a problem. The whole inside of the bus was filled with smoke, electrical fire. We sprang into action, trying to find out where the fire was. We're opening up bay doors on the outside and looking through at each other, right? We're making sure no one's on the bus. We call the bus driver, and he runs out to join us. And we finally isolated the problem down to the bus generator. Now, the generator is what's used when the bus is parked, so you can run the fridge, the heat, the TVs. And after some research into the wiring, we discovered that the shore power plug had been hillbilly wired. Now, a shore power plug is generally used when you park the bus inside a building and can't run the generator. As always, it's a power input connector. And as you'll hear later in the book, there's gazintas and comes-outas. They're not supposed to be able to match. Some Bubba had wired this plug to be a reverse sexed output. So the idea being you could use the generator to power a small stage or some other harebrained idea. The bus was covered in ice from the trip over the mountains, and so as it sat warming up in the parking lot, the ice melted and started shorting out the plug with no circuit breaker on it for protection. Now, we caught it just in the nick of the time as the wiring harness was melting onto our luggage. Fire retardant carpet in the bus bays saved the bus. I had a Christmas gift stored in the bay, and it was a glass lamp I had purchased along the road. Now, I had to gently scrape all the burned bits of plastic off the glass and spray it down with Febreze before I could wrap it up to give it to whoever the hell I was giving it to. And that's just some of the great stories from my 13-odd years spent with Michele Rankin. Peace out. Lackey and the Rodeo Kings. These guys. This band was music royalty. All the members are heroes of mine to one form or another. Stephen Fearing sings like an angel. Colin Linden is the Jimmy Page of roots, rock, folk blues, guitar, and Tom Wilson's an epic space Wookiee. See glossary. 3 frontmen backed by John Diamond, Gary Craig, and keyboard royalty. The 3 got together to record a tribute album to the great Canadian songwriter Willie P. Bennett. When I heard that album, I was pretty blown away. And I decided I was going to be their lighting guy, even though the position didn't exist. I beat the bushes for contacts and got myself an introduction to Tom Wilson. Told him I'd bring in lights and do the 2 nights for free at the venerable Horseshoe Tavern in Toronto. I had a truckload of lights from another show, so it was pretty easy to roll over to that dive bar and set up a big rig and a small dive bar. The shows were awesome, and I felt I got along with the band members very well. From the early days of Junk House, I've loved Tom's songwriting, and he's one of the most confident, in-the-moment frontmen ever. Due to the aforementioned Wookiee look, he takes light well, and you can blast floor light at him that would be toxic to other performers. Now, as the years rolled by, I kept lighting the band for a minimal charge across the province when my schedule allowed it. And around this time, I got my first street bike. I got a brand new Yamaha 1100, classic with saddlebags and room for luggage. Career and hobby collided with excellent results. The next album was Kings and Queens, a disc of duets with some great female singers like Holly Cole, Mary Margaret O'Hara, and others. Tom calls me and tells me we're going into Massey Hall for one night, and we're going to film the concert for a chorus. This gives me a real production budget for the first time, and a headlining show in one of Canada's finest concert halls. I work on the art side of the show with Tom for almost 4 months, burning the music in the shop as I designed, analyzed, refined, and then redesigned the rig for maximum impact. As the show got closer, the television side started getting flaky, and about 2 weeks before, they pulled out completely. So now I'm left with a Live Nation budget, and those can be a joke, on a sold-out night in the big room. The only way to get this gig done and keep my integrity intact was to take what little money was left and apply it to the cross rentals and donate all my gear. By now, I had my own console, LEDs, collection of vintage gags. I remember walking back into Massey from a smoke break after Focus and pausing to marvel at the huge, beautiful layered stage I designed, filling this magnificent hall. I was proud that I owned actually most of the stuff up there. The band had a plan to perform Arcadian Driftwood around one microphone in the middle of the audience. Now, in smaller venues, it's relatively easy, but in a big union venue, you want to rehearse it. You want to make sure it's going to look and sound okay, and that you can get your logistics done and get the band out there with the minimum of dead air. Now, when I asked Colin if we were doing the song that way, he blew up on me, and I finally understood just how far apart we were on our perspective of production. Well, it was a pretty magical night, but that's when I realized that I had done months of work with Tom. It was Colin's band. Sometimes I'm not the brightest light on the truss. It was a magical night, but my last with the band. Now, it all turned out well as my brother from another mother, Don Thorsness, has been their LD ever since. I got the call to light Holly Cole after she joined us at Massey Hall for the Blackie and the Rodeo Kings debut of the Kings and Queens album. Holly's a magical performer with just killer instincts, and my time spent with her band was invaluable for me to learn how to light jazz. My first night with her, we were in a casino in Vancouver, and my set list had the words drum solo. So we come to that part of the show, and I lean in on the strobe lights. Whoops. It's a jazz drum solo. And like a cat that hits the glass and, doesn't acknowledge it, I keep at it. I'm not going to admit defeat till it's over. Now, that night in the hobby bar, our tour manager, Mike Primo, informs me that strobes and jazz are a firing offense. So away we go on a run of dates, and I keep trying to light the drum solo with less than spectacular results. Now, around night 4, as we come up to that part of the show, our horn player, Johnny Johnson, he's standing right beside me at the light board. He says, "Why don't you just put a white light on Davide and let him do his thing?" Thanks, JJ. You're a great player, and your advice was invaluable to me as it appears I wasn't getting the jazz drum solo vibe. We did tons of beautiful shows together. I would have 3 or 4 faders with her front light under my hand, and the band under the other hand, and my eyes on Holly. I refer to this band as Monsters of Jazz. Aaron Davis on the piano, George Kohler on the bass, Davide Lorenzo on the drums, JJ or Colleen Peterson on the winds. These cats are the best in their field, and together we were a pretty killer unit. And a real shout out to the best dressed road crew in showbiz, Kenny Friesen on front of house audio, Mike Primo, tour manager and monitors, Krista Miller looking after Holly, and me backing off on the strobes. After 5 years or so, the project with me stalled, and as of writing this, I'm not even sure if I still work for her. Over to you, Tom Barry. Drums! Bass! I said bass! Anybody? 5440. Getting to light a Canadian band I grew up listening to has got to be the gold standard in employment. Their manager, Alan Moy, reached out to me via Facebook on the band's 30th anniversary tour. I share the band with Don Thorsness, as he lights most of the West Coast and I do Winnipeg and East. They're performing their first album in its entirety, so my first run was deep cuts and big hits. Now, the thing about these guys is they have so many radio hits that some people remember the song, but not the band. So when the rhythm section kicks into another song, those fans grab their beers and head to the dance floor. For the rest of us, it's the soundtrack of our lives. I remember when Baby Ran was a huge hit and my unfortunate fashion choices at the time. My time started after the departure of founding member Phil Comparelli and the addition of Dave Genn, formerly of the Matthew Good Band. Dave's an underrated musical genius in this land. He's an arranger, writer, producer, multi-instrumentalist, and all-around good man. Among the things that he has taught me, when playing the bass, if there's a choice of using a lower set of notes than a higher set, take the low road and leave the space for the melodic instruments. Count with your heel, not your toes. It sends the energy up your spine. And when asked to sign a presented pair of boobies in the autograph line, gently cup the boob with your left hand. Brush the nipple twice with your thumb, and sign those titties with your ever-present Sharpie. Told this by Billy Gibbons of ZZ Top. Neil Osborne is one of the greatest frontmen in a rock band. He's a total natural on stage, at ease with who he is, and he gives it his all every night. Neil has so much time behind the mic that he always says the right thing and can read a crowd like no other. Our acoustic touring has been a riot of road stories on the microphone. I travel with lots of video. When we have screens, I play some great clips. Now, one set of images I use is high contrast outlines of dancing girls. It's totally PG rated and very strong visually. One night in Victoria, Neil's hometown, when we finished the song and after the applause died down, a woman's voice yelled out, "I'm offended by that video!" Now my blood ran cold for a split second, and then I reached for the button to put the image back up on the screen. Now as my finger hovered over that button, we all held our breath, and Neil simply replied, "Get your own band." I took my finger off the trigger. Now the rhythm section is what makes this band. All of Brad Merritt's bass lines are simple yet iconic, and he and Matt Johnson drive the band, so the Glimmer Twins can pose, preen, strut, like it should be. Matt's also been very forthcoming with advice to me as I've learned how to play bass. There's something about the way he can explain things that I just understand, and his dedication to practice is inspiring. Here's a little story about the Hayloft in Picton, Ontario. It's a barn in the middle of a field. On our first trip there, I was a little dismayed at what I walked into. Half a dozen soup cans on the floor with some 40-watt bulbs and a few strands of Twinkie lights. Easy day for me. I set up the back line and disappeared to the lake. As the band was on, I was sitting outside in the breeze, self-medicating. I snuck back inside the club through the kitchen, and I ducked behind the bar to grab the power bar with all the venue's lights on it. Now, Neil made a joke about thanking me for the great light show, and they proceeded to count in to "Love You All." And still nobody has seen me, so as they counted in and Dave starts the part, I grab that power bar and I start smashing that sumbitch like it owed me money. And every light in the club started going on and off. And the crowd and the band started doing this. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Deal the hand you got. Stolen Guitar Blues. In 2018, the night before our 2 sold-out shows at the Commodore in Vancouver, some douche canoes broke into our truck and stole 7 guitars and other gear. Priceless, irreplaceable guitars. Everyone sprang into action to borrow gear for the shows. I went to a music store and bought a hi-hat stand and some guitar straps. We crushed those 2 shows. We were the Fast and Furious, pounding out hit after hit with no time to set up for the next song. I felt like I was holding on to the faders for fear of being swept out to sea. As I was getting on the plane to come home, the police raided a storage locker in Surrey and recovered the 5 electric guitars. We're still looking for those 2 acoustic guitars. It's been over a decade, and we're busier than ever. Stand by blinders, sing it, Dave. There's a light that shines right through your eyes. Dynamo and Bad Nut Beats featuring Retinal Trauma. I met these guys on a corporate show where they were playing the Sting music for an awards show. After the event, they did a set of their own music, and I wasn't ready for the costumes. Dressed head to toe in white with white masks, they were a lighting director's dream and playing trippy-ass music. I had been riffing on the idea of becoming a performing lighting director, controlling the lights from the stage and getting to jump around with the band. When I realized how liberating a costume was, the character of Retinal Trauma was born. With just Brad Park on drums and Ben Harrison on keyboards, there was room for a guest Yeti at center stage. We played a few clubs in Toronto and shot an epic video for When You Come Together in my studio at 7 Fraser. Now this band allowed me to break my musical cherry on the other side of the lights. I was still thinking about lighting, but little did I know it then, but that project gave me the confidence to pick up the bass and start bands of my own. I owe you boys a ton, and dog we trust. So that's some memories of the artists that I've worked for the closest over the years. I do respect and love y'all. Thank you for your trust in my visions of your art. I'll move mountains for any artist playing original music and willing to take me on the road. I'll take exposure bucks at par, but the per diem is high.